you're not familiar with the Liam Neeson interview that was recently released, please do a quick Google search. In short, the famous actor said in an interview, when he was younger, a friend of his was raped by a black man, and for a week he roamed the streets hoping that any black man would start trouble with him so he could kill them.
She told me she had been raped, but she handled the situation of the rape. I asked, did she know who it was? No. What colour were they? She said it was a black person. I went up and down areas with a cosh, hoping I'd be approached by somebody. I'm ashamed to say that. And I did it for maybe a week, hoping some black bastard would come out of a pub and have a go at me about something, so that I could kill him.
I think this controversy is symptomatic of three key issues are prevalent in Western society today. The spirit of white supremacy, which often goes unchallenged by churches and church leaders, white privilege, and the curse of the colonizer. Before I continue, we encourage dialogue on all issues, especially issues as controversial as this. If you intend to comment, either positive or negative, please watch Curse of the Colonizer, a link to which will appear in the top right hand of the screen. The foundation of what I'm about to say has already been laid out in that video, so if you have any opinions on this video, you should ideally base them on the whole counsel of this word. Proverbs 18 verse 13 says, "He that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him." The current world domination of Western civilization has been in part founded on its exploitation of capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. Characteristics central to capitalism include private property, capital accumulation, wage labor, voluntary exchange, a price system, and competitive markets. In a capitalist market economy, decision-making and investment are determined by every owner of wealth, property, or production ability in financial and capital markets, whereas prices and the distribution of goods and services are mainly determined by competition in goods and service markets. Critics of capitalism argue that it establishes power in the hands of a minority capitalist class that exists through the exploitation of the majority working class and their labor, prioritizes profit over social good, natural resources, and the environment, and is an engine of inequality, corruption, and economic instabilities. Supporters argue that it provides better products and innovation through competition, disperses wealth to all productive people, promotes pluralism and decentralization of power, creates strong economic growth, and yields productivity and prosperity that greatly benefit society. The dominant form of Western civilization's capitalism operates just as its critics state. A rich minority elite exploit the majority working class and control the masses. One of the main tools of capitalism is racism. How and why? Marxism, which is a method of socio-economic analysis founded by the philosopher Karl Marx, has a good answer. This is taken from the socialistworker.org. For revolutionary Marxists, there is an inextricable link between racism and capitalism. Capitalism is dependent on racism as both a source of profiteering, but more importantly as a means to divide and rule. Racism is necessary to drive a wedge between workers who otherwise have everything in common and every reason to ally and organize together, but who are perpetually driven apart to the benefit of the ruling class. White supremacy, which in relative terms is a new concept, has been used by the ruling elite of this world for around 400 years as a tool of division and separation, which helps to keep the masses blind to the corrupt power the elite few wield. Do I think Liam Neeson is a racist? No. Do I think he's a product of a society that has and still systematically oppresses those with darker skin? Absolutely. And so are you. As outlined in The Curse of the Colonizer, all of us who have grown up in this system, if we are not born again and consciously rejecting the ideals that the satanic system is propagating, are subject to its evils. Whether we are the oppressed who buy into the oppressor's lies, or we are the beneficiaries of the oppressor's lies, and fail to acknowledge or actively reject the oppressor's ideals. The spirit of white supremacy, which is a satanic spirit, is real and one which dominates Western society. One only has to watch the news or simply read a history book to come into contact with this spirit. And whether you identify as black or white or none of these, you have been or are influenced by this spirit. So, white privilege. Is this actually a thing? Let's look at a definition that I believe to be accurate. White privilege, a social relation, a right, advantage, or immunity granted to or enjoyed by white persons beyond the common advantage of all others. An exemption in many particular cases from certain burdens or liabilities. As a black person living in Western society, I live in the knowledge of racism in my conscious and subconscious. When I leave my house, whether I like it or not, every interaction I have with someone who does not share my skin tone is tinged with a certain fear of how I will be perceived. If a person who of another culture or nation, notice I didn't say race as there's only one race, looks at me in a peculiar way, I immediately think, is it because of my skin color? Amongst other many potential reasons. I could have food on my face. They might be having a bad day. Whereas if this same situation happened in the country of my parents' birth, Jamaica, I would have no such burden. Apply the same concept to going for a job interview. Did I not get the job because I'm black, or is it because I'm not good enough? Why does this matter? Because the majority of people in the West are not black, and this majority also owns most of the wealth and the means to produce wealth. They also control the education systems, the media, they make laws, and they serve justice or injustice. So what is the likelihood of someone like me, whose people have been systematically oppressed by the Western elite, taking part in a truly fair and balanced meritocracy? This is a very small example of what white privilege means in the Western world, because even if you are poor, broke, and white, you are still not black and do not have the psychological burden of being an oppressed minority. President Lyndon Baines Johnson eloquently noted, "I'll tell you what's at the bottom of it," he said. "If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you." And that, my friends, is a very good example of the satanic trick that many cultures and nations have fallen for. You see, the likelihood of Liam Neeson feeling this way about any other group of people is slim. But the likelihood of him repeating this story had it been about someone from another culture is almost impossible. If it was a Jew, he would have never dared to repeat this story. Subconsciously, Neeson knew that the repercussions for telling this story would not be life-changing. In his world, he is the majority, and the group of people his anger was aimed at are a systematically oppressed and hated minority. Liam Neeson, for all the furore he has created, will get another opportunity to provide for his family. He can afford to make mistakes. Most black people in the West can't, because it could mean being shot by a policeman, gaining a criminal record, or being ostracized from mainstream society. Imagine raising 7 children in a country that invited you to come and help make it great again. But when you arrived, you saw signs that said no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. Now imagine having to have a conversation with your children about being careful because they will encounter people who hate them for no other reason than the fact that their skin color is different. I could go on, but I hope I've made my point. People of all cultures and nations need to be aware of the world we live in, especially if you are born again. We don't live in a fantasy world where racism didn't exist and only a few people come into contact with it. There are people who live with its evil lurking in their subconscious, who bypass its mental oppression daily and fight against its law to live lives saturated by hatred. Consider them. Finally, don't be ignorant to the devices of Satan. For God hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth. We all have one common enemy, and he has no love for any of us. All liars and haters of mankind have no inheritance of eternal life to look forward to. Let us take time to be more mindful of the reality of the evil world we live in. Stay close to Christ.